Welcome to today's National Safety Council webinar entitled Safe and Sound Employee Perception Survey. Crystal Cannan is the Senior Manager of Survey Research Services at the National Safety Council. She has been with the National Safety Council for 6 years. Crystal manages the technical and operational components involved in all phases of the Employee Perception Survey consulting services offered by NSC. She provides survey research and statistical expertise in survey development and analysis so all results are valid and based on defensible research methods. At NSC, Crystal has worked with hundreds of organizations across varying industries and varying sizes. She has also presented survey information and survey results and action planning recommendations to both governmental and non-governmental client contacts. Prior to working at NSC, Crystal obtained experience and education in research, psychological assessment, and testing. She holds a master's degree in psychology. To ask a question via the web presentation, choose the chat pod located in the lower left corner of your screen. Type your question in the text box and click on the Send button. Please note that all questions will be answered by the presenter via email by the end of the week. Now I'd like to turn the program over to Jane Terry with NSC.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar opportunity as part of building up to Safe and Sound Week. The National Safety Council is an organizer of Safe and Sound Week in partnership with OSHA, and we greatly appreciate the partnership and the opportunity to educate others about safety and health programs and the value of those. As a reminder, Safe and Sound Week will take place August 13th through 19th, and you can access several resources for it on both the NSC and the OSHA websites. And also, since we're almost to June, want to remind everybody that June is National Safety Month, and I hope that you will participate in that as well. To get more information on National Safety Month, please visit nsc.org/NSM. Thank you very much, and I will turn things over to Crystal.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you all. Good afternoon. I'm excited to present today on measuring safety excellence using employee safety perception surveys. And as Jane mentioned, on behalf of the National Safety Council, we're proud to partner with OSHA on the Safe and Sound initiative. Safety is not a destination, it's a journey. And I imagine if you are attending this webinar today, you are either already on that journey or looking to start that journey. For the next hour, we have a lot to cover. I'm going to discuss what the journey to safety excellence is, why leadership and employee engagement are so important, and how that all ties into performance measurement using employee perception surveys effectively. The ultimate goal for this webinar is that everyone attending, each one of you, walks away with the knowledge about proactive measurement and best practices in employee perception surveys that have been established through 30 years of NSC working with thousands of organizations and surveying millions of employees. I do always like to start off to talk a little bit about the National Safety Council and who we are. The National Safety Council is a not-for-profit, non-governmental organization with international bridge. Everything that we do at the Council is centered around our mission. And our mission is to eliminate preventable deaths at work, in homes, in community, and on the road. And we do this through leadership, research, education, and advocacy. Deaths from unintentional injury is now, for the first time, the third leading cause of death. So we definitely have our work cut out for us. And thank you to all the partnerships we have and for all of you in the work that you do to make us safer and keep each other safe. As a researcher, I want to start out with the data. What do the stats say? Workplace fatalities are on the rise for the third year in a row, as you can see in this chart. It is speculated that a large decrease in fatalities between 2007 and 2009, you can see that over here, is a result of the poor economy. But now with the economy improving, people are getting back to work, deaths are on an increase. Employers, employees at organizations, we cannot ignore this data, and we need to identify the trends leading to this rise so we can address them head-on together. When looking at the incident rate trends, we will see that private sector incident rates have been decreasing steadily since 1992. However, still today, over 12,000 American workers are injured each day. Looking for opportunities to prevent these deaths and injuries is not only the right thing to do, but it also, as an organization, protects your bottom line. The comprehensive annual costs for preventable injuries and deaths are in the billions. And now that we have looked at the available data, we can start talking about the solution. A continuous journey to provide workers with the knowledge, tools, and environment to go home safely every day to their families. The journey to safety excellence. The National Safety Council developed the Journey to Safety Excellence based on some best practices, the NSC 9 elements, and standards for SMS or guidelines. At the core of this journey, you will see right here, the core are 4 pillars: leadership and engagement, safety management systems, risk reduction, and performance measurement. Using these pillars as cornerstones of your safety program will help ensure you have an effective safety system in place and help develop a positive safety culture at your organization. And you will notice around the core is the continuous improvement process. While the ultimate goal is 0 injuries, it will take continuous effort and improvement to strive for excellence. And the first step in that process is honestly asking, where are you now? And where do you want to be? And therefore, in today's webinar, we're going to talk about performance measurement with both lagging and leading indicator data as an important first step in establishing on your journey. We all know that what gets measured gets managed. But think about it. What gets measured predicts or dictates your safety goals, your outcomes, your countermeasures. It's not only going to drive the different measurement activities, but also the different safety activities that your organization participates in. And you can involve employees, not only in the safety activities or the trainings, but in this continuous improvement process, leading to a stronger foundation, not only in engagement, but also in measurement and developing your improvement plans or corrective actions. So next I am going to discuss and focus on 2 pillars: leadership and engagement and performance measurement, as these tie in really nicely with the employee perception surveys. The first key element or pillar is leadership and employee engagement. Employee engagement is definitely a trending buzzword right now. I'm sure many of you see it out there. There's so much research. If you Google it on the website, you're going to see so much regarding employee engagement. So it's definitely a buzzword, and for some good reason. There's a lot of current research that supports increased employee engagement affects the bottom line. The more engaged the workforce, the more productive. It increases productivity. However, from my perspective, or more importantly, employee engagement is key when it comes to establishing safety excellence and to creating safer employees, a positive safety culture, an effective safety management system, whatever terminology currently fits your goals at your organization. I was just looking at some recent research. And so there's research out there regarding employee engagement and safety. a range from either 40 to 70% are less likely to have a safety incident. So the more engagement definitely equals less safety incidents. And safety is something we can all support. We can get behind. So it's a goal, but it's also a channel for increasing your overall organizational culture. Worker engagement and safety leads to better outcomes, and their buy-in is really key to any sustained change that you want to see at your organization. So many organizations we work with, they come and they say, you know, how do we get more employee buy-in? Or we're developing all these solutions, but they're not reaching the employee. This real change does not happen overnight, but it is possible. And it starts with strong leadership. It starts at the top, and that's why we're starting here during this webinar. Leadership, if you are a leader or if you're in another role within your organization, this will help you understand what the role of leadership is. And really, leadership needs to establish a vision with strong, clear, and a consistent commitment to safety. Then the behaviors, leadership's behaviors and actions should align with this vision. I would say if we had conversations or you asked any leaders of organizations, most would say they value safety and they don't want any of their employees to be injured or not go home to their families. But the question is, what do your employees hear or see? In a recent national poll, about 1/3 of American workers believe that when it comes down to getting the job done, productivity takes precedence over their own safety. Furthermore, when we look at that number and compare with the NSC database or typical responses of organizations that use NSC surveys, 1/3 is quite high. So again, letting us know that there's some work to do. Leadership's commitment is going to set the tone. The organizational strategies and actions need to be visible and genuine. I can't state how important this is. Employees know when you're not being genuine, especially when it comes to their safety. Partnerships between the leadership and employees will establish a culture of safety. And in order to establish this trust and this partnership, employees need to feel psychologically safe. Developing trust stems from feeling heard, respected, and valued. Employee perception surveys, when done right, can start you on a path, opening up the lines of communication with your employees, involving them in safety, and continuing that employee feedback loop, which I'm going to go into further detail later. But it all starts with strategically providing channels for employees to communicate. Whether it be a third-party survey, an internal survey, or some other opportunity for employees to provide anonymous feedback so that leadership can do something with it. So I want to take a moment of reflection here. I know we don't have engagement, but something if you have a pen and paper or you just want to take this minute, I want you to think about how you communicate at your organization. What tone do you as a leader or the leaders at your organization set? And so I'm just going to pause for about 30 minutes for you to think about that question. When it comes to integrating safety into the organization, leadership demonstrates how to do it. And it starts with them requiring accountability from all employees. Safety is not only the safety professional's job. This is true for large and small organizations alike. Leadership needs to make sure safety is not viewed as taxing, something added to the employees that they have to do on top of their job. By taking a proactive approach to safety, getting employees involved in the safety decisions and actions will help gain this accountability and buy-in. One way to think about management and leadership, and I really like this slide, is seeing management as what we do, and seeing leadership is how we do it. These are not either-or concepts. If everyone can think about someone that they felt was truly a leader, are you picturing that person? Was it that they managed or how they managed? Leaders need to aim to get the right things done the right way, the safe way. Engage your employee's mind, or engage your mind through the heart. I know that an experience on working for a company much like the National Safety Council, where my leadership values my safety first and foremost, not only in their words but in their actions and in their strategies, it touches my heart. It further engages me to be passionate about the work and bring that out to other individuals, much like I'm doing today. How do you measure management or leadership? And you can measure leadership through perceptions, through employee perceptions on leadership's participation, the way they really walk the talk when it comes to safety. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, well, my leadership is not engaged, or they're pretty unaware of what's going on. How do I do this? How do I handle this if it starts at the top? Hearing this information from their employees through data, through something like an employee perception survey, is a way for them to recognize, acknowledge, and be poised to change. For example, our surveys at the National Safety Council look into different areas, such as leadership or management engagement, supervisor engagement, employee engagement. So you will have the data to make some informed decisions regarding your solutions moving forward. Now that we've touched base a little bit on leadership and employee engagement, another pillar of the journey to safety excellence is performance measurement. I assume that the majority of you on the call measure safety performance some way with your organization. If you don't know, you can ask. And if you don't, then it's, maybe you're on this call to think about how you can start. Measurement will help provide direction and keep a pulse on safety as you're going through this continuous improvement process. And I will tell you that there are entire professional development sessions on measurement, performance measurements, on a lot of these areas that I'm talking about today. So we're putting a little bit of an overview of these different topics into this 1-hour session. And as Ellen mentioned earlier, if you have some follow-on questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or follow up with me. I'll have my information later, and I'd be happy to answer them for you. But why do you want to measure? Why do you want to measure safety management system performance? Safety Management System, or SMS performance measurement, is really key to providing the focus and direction in developing data-driven action plans and countermeasures. Identifying those gaps, those trends, the risk, will facilitate better decision-making for both leadership and employees. If you don't know what those gaps are, you can have a lot of diffuse efforts, many things going out that aren't really sticking with the organization or not even visible to your employees. So with the data, you can really be strategic and you can focus. And as the common saying goes, what gets measured gets managed, gets done, gets attention, it gets direction, and it also gets remeasured, or it should get remeasured to see the progress that you're making. Now some of you may be on different parts of this journey. So the first question that you may have is, what are you currently measuring? How do you do it? And are your corrective actions or efforts based on that data? So are you collecting this data and not doing anything with it? Are you not collecting? When you decided what to measure, did you identify key safety management system elements that you want to look into? Are your measurements properly balanced between proactive or process-oriented measures and reactive outcome-based measures, which I will talk about in the next slide? And do you identify appropriate goals or measurement for each organizational level? Is there some way to have that accountability across the different levels at your organization? The good news is, no matter where you are currently at this measurement stage, you can incorporate employee perception surveys. Employee perception surveys are a leading indicator, so they're a proactive measure. You're going to hear this a lot during the webinar. But I have this slide up just as kind of a brief overview on a trailing or lagging indicators versus the leading indicators. Both lagging and leading indicator measures are vital for performance measurement. Lagging indicators are going to focus on the past. What went wrong? The injuries, the fatalities. Leading indicators look towards the future. They're based on risk, gap analysis, and are an excellent opportunity to engage employees in developing solutions. These are your frontline employees. They're the ones that are going to know the solutions, and they interact with that risk every single day. Why not get their feedback? Now, just so that you can have it in the handout later, I do have some examples of leading and lagging indicators here. So you'll see on the left side, I list some of the lagging indicators. And on the right side, I'm listing some leading indicators. If you want to take a deeper dive and research into any of these or look how you can implement them at your organization, I'm sure there's plenty of information on all of these. And you may be doing all of these as well. I'm going to focus primarily on that bottom leading indicator, culture or perception surveys. When done right, employee perception surveys are one of the most effective ways to generate those leading indicator metrics for that continuous improvement process at your organization, while also engaging employees and engaging leadership. So we've talked about that and why it's so important. Think about it. What would your employees say if they had a survey? Would you be on the same page? And this all started at the National Safety Council about 30 years ago. 30 years ago, several of our member organizations, they came to the National Safety Council and they wanted to partner with us. They wanted to find a better indicator of their safety program quality. They wanted comprehensive and sensitive or detailed data that they could use to make real and sustained safety improvements before a safety incident occurs. And so we partnered with them, and we went to the research, and we went to the experts. And what we found is that if you ask all employees across the organization the same and the right kinds of questions, that you will have enough information to proactively look into ways to stop an event before it occurs. And furthermore, through those 30 years, we've also seen that employee perceptions are really a way to bridge the gap between perception and reality. This will help predict your future outcomes. Leadership and employees can all get on the same page when it comes to managing risk. Surveys should be comprehensive enough to identify gaps and perceptual differences, but not so long that they affect completion. So typically a survey, within about 20-25 minutes, so 10 to 20 minutes is optimal. Thinking about the surveys, it should provide you with the opportunity to sort your strengths, celebrate those strengths, look at those strengths. It's an excellent opportunity to get employees involved on what you're doing really well. But also identify those weaknesses or opportunities. Looking at those strengths, are there anything that you can build upon that will help with those other opportunities? So you need enough data or enough questions in order to do this, and that's something to think about. They also set the stage for strategic and tactical improvement process. So as you're looking at your survey results, and when we're working with a lot of the organizations, the one thing we have to do is tell them, scale back a little bit, prioritize. Because when you're looking at your results, sometimes we want to work on everything, right? We're like, oh, how could this be happening and I didn't notice? But to do something well and give it enough focus and attention that it sticks and it lasts, You need to prioritize, select some of your data in order to move forward. And through this process, well, I've been talking a lot about the leading indicator piece of the employee perception survey. In the last 30 years, we've found some additional benefits when it comes to surveying employees that you don't always think about when you're looking at surveys. But really, it helps increase the visibility of safety importance. So if you're leadership and you're looking to promote a safety, proactive safety processes, a survey is an excellent way to do that because you're increasing the visibility of safety. You're coming to your organization, you say, we're going to do this survey, it's important, I want to know what's impacting you every single day. It also helps with a collaborative approach, and this can have extremely far-reaching impact. One, you're providing a channel for all employees to speak. Then you're doing something with it. And so that's the employee feedback loop. And I'm going to talk about the employee feedback loop. But with that in mind, think about the other benefits of surveying that may be additional to those metrics. Increased visibility of the importance of safety. Increased knowledge. When the employees sit down, for example, to take one of our survey and we're asking about critical safety management system components, they're gaining knowledge on what a successful safety management system should look like. And increased engagement and communication with leadership, really setting the tone for safety. We say this all the time whenever I'm talking to a new organization that's going to do a survey. And people ask me, well, what are the recommendations or are there any restrictions to organizations who shouldn't survey? And I would say, don't survey if you don't plan on doing something with the results. One of the worst things that you could do is ask employees for their feedback and then do nothing with it. You need to be transparent and visible in this process. And so here's the employee feedback loop. This is a common terminology, and it relates when you're conducting employee perception surveys. The first part here is planning. So you want to be strategic on how you're going to collect your feedback. What are you going to collect your feedback on? So my background has a little bit in assessments, testing assessments. And there's a variety of ways on collecting feedback. You can do an internal survey. You can do a survey through a third party. You can do some focus groups or consulting through other ones. I will say with the survey, it does depend on your resources and what their availability is, but we're going to talk about some best practices, and that includes this. If you are planning on using an internal survey for your employees, one thing I would say is don't take it very lightly. I know survey monkeys out there and there's lots of tools, but how you ask your questions are very important, and you want to make sure that you're asking the right things. You wouldn't develop an IQ test or a personality test for your employees, in a half an hour and shoot it out to everyone. More than likely you would get an expert in that area or at least some assistance, so that's something to think about. But once you do collect that data, and it's confidential and it's anonymous, you want to interpret, you want to analyze it. One of the cons that, with surveys is it'll tell you that something's a gap or it's lower performing, but it might not tell you why unless you have some open-ended comments or you have some discussions later regarding that survey. And a step that often gets missed is communicating the results and saying thank you to your employees. If you do a survey, any type of survey, you need to say thank you. You need to communicate back in a timely fashion. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be all the results. We typically recommend saying thank you. Here's where you said we're doing really well. Here's where you said we need some work. And here's how you can get involved in those next steps. And then those next steps include acting, developing action planning and countermeasures regarding the survey results. After those are in place, you execute it, and you may need to refine, you may need to monitor, and then you start back in the beginning on how are you going to remeasure to see your progress. So you always want to keep this feedback loop in mind whenever you're conducting a survey or thinking about employee communication, as it's vital that you complete this cycle. For the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to start talking about some best practices specifically in surveying, in different areas of surveying, and I'm going to start with administration. There are a couple different ways you can administer a survey. The first way, the best practice that we recommend is census surveying. So what a census is giving the opportunity for all of your employees to take part in the survey process. Again, linking back to that beginning part of engagement. Give everyone the opportunity to be heard. Not only will this help with your engagement, but really you're getting more valid results when you give everyone the opportunity. It's not only specific groups that tend to speak up. It's not only leadership. Actually, their perceptions tend to be a little bit higher than the frontline employees, but everybody. Now, some organizations might elect to sample. And so what sample is you take a group of employees and you only elect them to take the survey. To do sampling well and right is a bit difficult. So I would say if you are looking to sample, definitely do some research on it, or if you have, some data person in your organization, try to get their help with it. I'll give you some information, but there's entire statistics and research methods classes on just this aspect. But I will tell you, if you are going to sample your employees, you want to make it representative of your organization. So what that means is that the groups that you survey or the people that you elect are proportional to the groups within your organization. Are you 20% management, 80% employees? How many different departments do you have? Are they all represented in the survey? Are the bigger departments, do they have the correct number of people, and the smaller ones have less people? And that way one area is not overrepresented in your sample. Sampling can actually really be difficult and hard with a survey. So if you can do a census and you provide the opportunity for everyone to survey in their preferred language, either paper or online, which I'll talk about next, that's honestly the best recommendation to go. Also, you want to consider the anonymity and confidentiality of the survey. These two words are used interchangeably a lot of times, but there's actually specific differences regarding these words. So I'm going to define them real quick, and I'll tell you the most important takeaways. So when you think about anonymous, anonymous means that the data or the response is not linked to the respondent. So you do not collect any identifying information. Now, confidential means someone may have that information or know the connection between the participant and their response. So it could be if you go through a third party and you identify them and they have that information but then they don't share it with you, that's confidential. Anonymous is there's absolutely no way to track a survey response. It's not only the fact that the survey is anonymous or it is confidential, there's other things to consider. The perception of anonymity. Perception is so important. So if you ask too many demographic questions, that has the perception that they will be able to be tracked. So many times when we're working with organizations regarding demographics that you want to add, really think about your goals. What information is going to be actionable? Don't ask employees to identify things that you cannot act on. So some things that may be very helpful in market research will not be so helpful when you're looking at a safety survey. So things like gender, race. Not only are they sensitive, but may not be helpful. How do you create action plans based on gender? And you don't want the perception in any way that the survey is being tracked or the responses are being tracked. Another really important factor when it comes to surveying in survey administration, and I can't stress it enough, is communicate, communicate, communicate. So you want to have pre-survey communications, during the survey communicate, and post-survey communicate. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or robust. however your employees naturally get their information. And that may vary across your different organizations, depending on if you're mobile, if you're more stationary, what type of employees you have. I did include on this slide, it's just two examples of something our clients did for their survey, and they gave us permission to share it, so that's right there. You also, in your communication, want to be very clear on the time of the survey and how people are supposed to take the survey. We are in the year 2018, and like I said, there are a lot of online survey tools. So we can do surveys online, or you can do surveys online. There's still paper survey, and there might be a possible need for mixed method survey. In our 30 years of experience, we've really figured out how to get the best response rates. The organizations we work with at least get 60% of their employees to respond to surveys. And why is that? One, you strategize. You look at your workforce. You make sure that the survey's in a format that all employees have access to while they are at work. Give them time and space to take the survey. If you do paper survey, make sure they have confidentiality envelopes that they can enclose the survey in so they know they're not being tracked. For either or, group administration works best. Again, this may depend on the uniqueness of your organization, but what we find is group administration and paper surveys. And I will say we kind of are skewed a little bit because we work a lot in utilities, manufacturing, transportation, and that a lot of the employees don't have access to computers. So paper surveys are still an integral part of that process. But that's something you need to think about. If your employees don't have easy access to computers, then paper surveys might need to be an option for you. And you do that in group administration. So if you have something already part of your process, don't reinvent the wheel. If you already do some sort of all-staff meetings, pre-shift meetings, safety trainings, make it a toolbox talk. Our standard surveys, like at NSC, is about 20 minutes. If you have somewhere that you can dedicate 20 minutes to a survey that's already built in, where employees already convene and have space, that's how you're going to get your best response rates. Now if you're doing it online, you may want to say, well, why can't I just track people so I can make sure who's doing the survey and who's not doing the survey? I would ask everyone on this call, best practice, don't do that. Try your best if you can't, because despite your even the best intentions, it has the perception of not being anonymous. So if you're doing an online survey, again, there's skepticism that people can be tracked, and they're a little weary of it. Still in the year 2018. It also takes a lot of follow-up. If you do an online survey and you have it open for 2 weeks, make sure you at least do follow-up at least weekly, reminding employees to take the survey. We get a lot of emails. An employee, technically they open it up and they're like, okay, I'll take it, but I can't do it right now, and then they completely forget about the survey. So that's why I said we still see the best response rates with paper surveys in a group setting. But you have to evaluate what's going to be the best for your employees. Also, you want to consider your survey instrument. And what that means is, what survey are you using? As I mentioned, there are third-party surveys. You can do an internal survey, and so you want to consider that. But remember, if you're using surveys for safety improvements, then it's a measure. And there are characteristics of a good measure that you need to consider. Again, there's entire courses on all of these, and you don't need to be researchers to understand it. But I'll give you a brief overview of things that you want to look at when you're looking at a survey. One thing is validity. And what validity is, it's really the extent to which the data that you're collecting through this instrument measures what it's intended to measure. So are the questions sound? Are they specifically measuring components that you're looking to act on? Are they good for the target audience? Is the reading level too high? There are various forms of validity. I'm not going to go into that. But one, you want to think about it. Ask the right questions and always ask yourself, what's my end goal? What am I trying to measure? And will my results be actionable? And that's that utility and practicality piece. So think about it. What am I trying to do with this survey? What's my end goal? I know even establishing a couple question survey, when I'm working in different departments at NSC for some quick information, you still have to ask that question and make sure that the questions or the items that you're developing will answer it. I don't know how many times I've seen some survey questions and I'm like, well, that's really interesting information. Well, what do you do with it? So you want your results to be actionable. And that's really that utility piece, that practicality piece. Can it reach everyone? Can you do something with it? Reliability means that you're measuring the same way each time. So you have similar responses each time to that measurement. And here's an example of how you validate. So this is using the National Safety Council Safety Barometer Survey, which is an employee perception survey that we offer. And there was some independent research that was done through the VHA, or the Veterans Health Administration, after they took their safety barometer. And what you are looking here is that we took a look at the percentile scores, or they took a look at the percentile scores compared to their injury and illness rates. And you'll see in this chart, I'm going to get the pointer, there's a nice negative line down there, or a nice down line. And what this is that they found strong negative correlation or relationship between the percentile score and their injury and illness rate. The higher the percentile score, the lower the injury and illness rate, and vice versa. This is something we do a lot with the organizations we work on. Again, are we measuring what we're saying we're measuring? So higher perceptions should equal lower illnesses and injury rates. And for this specific organization, they found across their different locations or their facilities that an increase of just one overall percentile point was associated with a decrease of approximately 13 injuries and illnesses. And so that's kind of validation that you want to think about when you're using a survey instrument. Am I measuring what I'm saying I'm measuring? Now, surveys are leading indicators, if you remember from the beginning of this. So it can also point you into, it has a predictive quality on it. If you're scoring low and maybe that data is not lining up, it might be telling you where you're going. So it's a great way to signal when something's not quite right. Now, when you're choosing a survey, I would say there's two really important things. One, the instrument, the questions that you're asking. What are you measuring? But the other best practices is look for benchmarking. Many people know about benchmarking, and you compare your data to other data and see where you fall in line. And in many terms, we think about it externally. Where do I see myself in my industry or with companies that are the same size as me? But that's not the true importance of benchmarking. Really, the true importance of benchmarking has to do with internally looking at your survey results so that you can prioritize them. And I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about bias. And also compare these results on a reference point. Is this good? So 60% of people said this. Okay, what's the normative data look like? Is there any reference point if this is good, if this is average, or if this is really low? And so benchmarking provides you with that piece of the puzzle. And the point that I like to introduce most is about bias. And there's bias that's inherent in all surveys. It's inherent in survey research. So now you're going to all be survey research experts as you leave this webinar. You can let them know I told you so. And the bias that we're looking at is in surveys we're dealing with what? Perceptions, attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, observations. This is not really kind of that hard science. We'd love everything to be, in a lab and, we can relate to it. But we're dealing with people and their perceptions. And there are many things that can influence the responses on any given day to a survey. And the first one is survey context bias. What's going on environmentally when employees sit down to take the survey? And that's something you'd want to think about if you're preparing to administer an employee perception survey. Are there a lot of holidays going on? Are people going to have the time to take it? Are they going to rush through this? Are they going to think about it? But one way to neutralize that, because we're in organizations and we're constantly changing and things are not always stagnant or the same, is to neutralize it. Compare you to a large comparison group of millions of employees across different industries that have that same things or those same elements in their environment that can influence them either more positive or more negative. But most importantly is survey instrument bias. And with survey instrument bias, is all items on a survey are using words. They're addressing topics. And they kind of have their own little behavior to themselves. So people tend to be either more positive or more negative based on the item that we're asking alone. And so I have a great example on the screen, and so I'd like to go to this. These are two survey items. The first one, and they're both taken off of our safety barometer survey. The first one is, it is common for employees to take part in identifying and eliminating worksite hazards. The second one is, job stress is a significant problem for me and my coworkers. Now, if you're only looking at the top, let me get the pointer, let's look at these results right here. This is the percentages. So the green right here are the percent of employees who responded strongly positive. This one is they had a positive response, a neutral response, negative, strongly negative. So from these results, it looks like we have exactly the same results, the same data. What would you do with this? How would you prioritize which one to work on? You probably talk about it and think about which one you really want to work on. But these items have their own valence, right? Their own tendency to be answered more positively or more negatively. So this first item here, employees identifying and eliminating hazards, it has what we call a positive valence. People tend to be more positive when responding to that item. This bottom one right here, it has a high negative valence. When you ask people about stress, there are not many people who are going to respond positively. There are not many people who are going to say they don't have stress at work. And so when we look at the normative data, when we compare and benchmark to our database that has millions of respondents for all of these items, and we provide a ranking within those items, that first one would only be in the 7th percentile. So that's on a scale from 0 to 100. So that means that your organization only scored higher than 7% of the organizations that you were compared to. Well, on the flip side, when we look at the stress, it scored at the 99th percentile. So that means that your employees at your organization actually have less stress than 99% of the organizations that you were compared to. That's how you prioritize. That's how you really figure out where your gaps are. Just looking at the percentages, they look equal results. When we look at and compare it to the normative data and we give it a reference point, this is definitely something you'd want to improve on. So with that in mind, after you get your survey results, you interpret them, you need to take action. And you want to convene and empower a survey action planning committee. So best practices that we recommend to all of our clients, and I will say the ones that have done this well, when they resurvey, they see dramatic improvement not only in their percentile scores, but also in their lagging indicators. For example, your information is kept confidential unless we are given permission to share as well. So I'm not going to say the names of the organization, but we just finished up a survey with an organization, and it's their second time doing it. And they followed the best practices as far as action planning to a T, and they saw dramatic changes across the board. They had results at every level, so for different kind of business units and divisions, as well as different locations and states. And they saw dramatic improvements across the board that they could tie back to their strategic improvements. And they even had a platform where everyone uploaded their countermeasures, which I'm going to talk about, to that platform. And so that's something to keep in mind, how you manage the action plans afterward. And why not empower the employees? So convene them. Get a committee together. Go over the survey results. Let it be a cross-section of employees, representative of your organization. So if you have operations, people from operations are there, office employees, across the board. Get them together, discuss the survey results. Have them strategically select some of the lower performing. Look at it like, okay, why is this lower performing? Do we have the resources to act on this? Or is it a low-hanging fruit? Is this something we can take care of right away? Then establish the process for tracking it. As I mentioned, the organization that we just finished up with, they used kind of a project management tool, and they had all their action planning committees at their different locations upload their action plans onto this project management tool, so that way there's oversight and some reminders. And again, leadership was involved enough to say, hey, I looked at all these, and kind of saying, where are you at? I'm really interested, and they feel empowered, and they meet regularly. Those are really some of your best practices when you are looking to take action for survey results. When developing your countermeasures, they should have SMART characteristics. Be specific. Be measurable. Is it based on action? The last two are sometimes really hard. Be realistic and be time-bound. So be realistic in what can get done in what amount of time. Now specific. You may have many countermeasures or ideas. So say, for example, your lowest scoring was at employees identifying and eliminating hazards. And your committee is getting together and you're like, okay, we really want to work on this one. This one's pivotal. We need to work on it. Be specific. When you develop a countermeasure, have it be one idea. If you have more ideas, develop a specific SMART countermeasure for that idea. And so I'm going to show you an example on this next slide. And this is a tool we developed here at the National Safety Council to go along with our action planning after our surveys. And you take your survey component. What are you working on? You list it right here. You list one good idea for improvement. You do a resource benefit analysis, that one idea, and then fill out this part for that idea. If you have another idea, it's another sheet. Because again, what gets written down gets done. You're going to establish some timelines, some champions for this. You're getting employees involved. And it necessarily doesn't have to be something very complicated or even something very expensive. A lot of the countermeasures in some areas have been simpler when they're developed by the employees, but the employees then have the buy-in. It's not something just being handed down to them from the safety department that's extra work, or feels like it's disciplinary in some way. This is their buy-in. It's their idea. And you know what, you got to give it a chance, give it a try to develop it. And if you do so and you think about it in SMART fashion, being specific, how are you going to measure implementation? How are you going to know it's working? What's the measure for there? Is it realistic? What are your challenges, your obstacles? What's going to help you? Who's going to help you? Who's going to be involved? And I would definitely say owners should not only be safety personnel. Get other people to be champions. Completion dates. When will this be complete and what will it look like when it is complete? That should be kind of an outline for what a SMART measure is. And so now we've circled kind of the whole process regarding employee perception surveys. We started off in the beginning really on the journey to safety excellence, thinking about where you are and where you want to be and how measurement is going to be a critical component of that. We looked at leadership and employee engagement within performance measurement and using employee perception surveys to measure leadership, to measure safety, as well as it's really a good and valid evaluation tool. See where you're currently at in your safety management system from your employee perspective, from the entire organization, so you can identify trends, gaps, risk, and that you can proactively make improvements that are going to create change at your organization. Then it's a tactical planning tool, right? So getting the results back, interpreting them. Plan not only your communication, but also your countermeasures. It's a motivational tool. Employees are gaining safety knowledge. They're seeing that safety is important. It's visible from leadership. They're being part of the proactive process and part of the solution. and it's a sensitive monitoring tool. So I'm going to end also with the fact is we mentioned what gets measured also gets remeasured. If you want to know if you're making progress in any of those areas, you're going to have to develop target dates for remeasuring and how you're going to remeasure. So if you use a survey, you want to use the same survey. If you decide to change up the survey, think about how you're going to measure the progress on those specific actions that you took after the last survey. So I do want to say thank you so much on behalf of the National Safety Council for attending today. Thank you for everything that you do at your organization, and if you're a leader within your organization or you just lead in your own way in safety, thank you for all that you do to keep each other safe. And as mentioned in the earlier one, we do have about 5 minutes left, so I can probably take a couple questions. But feel free to enter your question in the Q&A, and then I will email it by the end of the week along with all the responses. Thank you again so much, and thank you, OSHA, for all your work on the Safe and Sound campaign. We're really excited to partner with you on this. My information is right here on this last slide. You can feel free to email me if you have any specific questions as well.
Thank you for joining us today. This completes our program.